Welcome, everybody, to the Pipeline Report here today. It's Monday, the third day of August, 2026. So glad you're with us. We're back in our normal swing after our sabbatical month in July, even though we tried to come here each Monday with you. Vetting the news, letting you know what we need to be praying about, letting the Lord speak to us about clarity to navigate through this moment that we're in. And so today we got a couple topics we want to cover. One, obviously, Dr. Fauci issues that happened this past weekend and Friday as he tried to, well, he didn't speak to Congress, but he came before Congress. A couple insights about that. I think that's something that's very important because this is something that we covered in the past. We'll talk about that. Also, the Democrat Socialists. I know we talked a little bit about last week, but we want to cover that as well as the Iran crisis and what's happening there, how we can pray for our nation, especially when it concerns Israel and America in that hour. So let's get into it. Let's welcome to the Pipeline Report today. Well, there you are. I hope you enjoyed that introduction as we get ready to bring heaven to earth, letting heaven's perspective come through our discernment here and speaking into the earth for the hour that we are in. It is becoming the last of the last days, if we want to call it that. We know the last days started in the book of Acts. If you remember, they said, Peter quotes Joel chapter 2 and said, these are the last days. So we know we're getting further along in that moment. And there's so many things happening that let us know the hour we're in. You have the obvious things, wars, rumors of wars, earthquakes, and so forth. Jacob, if you watched his live stream last Friday on our Christian Center pages, he talked about the earthquake in Kumamoto area where we minister quite a bit. We go to that area often. Our people there are safe. We're so thankful for that. But that's part of another prophetic dream I had when I shared on my podcast as well as some of these platforms of God releasing a revival through the Pacific Rim. And one of the things we would know, the Lord showed me where it's going to hit is where those disasters happen. So we're excited for that because we've been pouring into that region. We bless the Lord for that purpose. Well, we have so many issues to cover tonight or this afternoon, whenever you're listening, if you're watching live or you're watching replay in the morning, whatever day you're watching it. We realize many people watch this because it comes at noon Central Time. But some of you have to watch by replay. Thank you for doing that. And please share this with others. That'll help us as well on our platform, sharing these live podcasts that we do here. Well, let's start tonight, this afternoon, about this very issue of Dr. Fauci. If you watched the fiasco, I called it last week. I watched a few minutes of it where he pleaded the fifth 111 times on the council of his council told him to say that, which is kind of unusual. He's been given a pardon. He had perfect immunity to do that, and he chose not to. And I think there's many reasons why. We're actually finding out now there is at least three states. I know Louisiana is one of them that are looking in. I know Alabama, Louisiana, and Florida are looking to see if the pardon covers state law of what he did with his hiding of what he did on his diaries that you call them. There really weren't diaries. If you saw what happened there as well, RFK shared that he actually was typing his notes on a government computer, and when he emailed it to himself, it became the possession of the U.S. government, which is legal. If you work at a workplace and you type on their computer, they have the right to go into that computer and get that information, in which we did. So a lot of people say, "Oh, they stole his diary." No, he was not very smart of what he put on there, but he did it, and so now it's public record. And now it's very clear he was lying to the American people. He didn't believe in masks. He didn't believe in social distancing, but he said, let's do it. I saw one note there where he told schools, colleges to make it as hard as possible on every student so that they would get vaccinated, forced them basically. And that's all recorded. That was actually an audio recording as well as some of his notes. So that's some of the things that happened. Well, I'll start here. Two congressmen that were doctors. One of them is our former congressman here in our district, Dr. Fleming, John Fleming, who's now our state treasurer, was a physician during the time of COVID. He was in Congress, and so he shares on another show with another doctor, another congressman, about what really this was about. So I want to play a little clip here of that, and that'll kind of give us some insight as to what was really going on behind the scenes, and from a physician's point of view.
It started out, obviously he was in a position of relevance, and I would just say that nobody there had any idea of the depth of his corrupt history over 40 years, at that, well, almost 40 years at that point, of exercising control and discipline over an entire swath of research and so forth. Like you see Deborah Birx in your shot there. She was a mentee, as was, it turns out, the then head of the Trump CDC, Bob Redfield. And they were effectively puppets of Fauci during this time, and they became critical players. Bob Redfield immediately, Deborah Birx a month or two in. And so he already, the people being brought in to this effort were already under his relative influence and control through research money and jobs they had had in the past. And this, we've never seen a bureaucrat that I know of ever in American history exercise the kind of control as Tony Fauci. We also have, and I'm just going to say this, Tony Fauci is associated with the deaths of more human beings than anyone in American history. And I'm including wartime presidents like FDR and Abraham Lincoln.
Wow.
Far more deaths.
Okay, Zach, let's go back to our history on pipeline here a little bit of us talking about these topics. Let's bring people up to date that are new to pipeline, what we went through as we tried to talk about these issues on this platform.
All right, there you go. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So repeat the question. Sorry, I was trying to get.
Yeah, I'm just talking about. Let's go through the history of what we went through as we were bringing out the very things they're talking about today. What they talked about at the congressional hearing with him. We were covering this back in 2020 and 2021. Look, let's tell the people what we kind of went through at Pipeline and how we were affected by our voice and our little voice here on this little Pipeline podcast or live stream.
Yeah. So with and that's kind of why we're even being somewhat precautious about some of the words we said, because YouTube created guidelines. Basically, you can't say certain words, you can't talk about certain topics, and the China virus being the main one. The only thing you could say was any medical information that was out there, and basically the only approved medical information, and anything that went against what they approved of was considered misinformation, is what you call it. And then they started doing what was called openly banning you, and then it turned towards they started getting sued. Then there was First Amendment rights because people were saying my opinion, etc., things like that, because that's just the freedom of speech that we have here in America. And what happened is they had to kind of curtail their guidelines to be able to help people. We actually got a strike against us for some of the things that were said, even though we were just really playing back the news and reading the news is what I was doing at the time, and reading news articles, ABC, CNN, CBS, etc., stuff like that, who were saying pretty vague things. And we were just saying, like, there's no information out about this, which was still is true. And so even our little voice kind of got muffled a little bit, and then they struck us, and we fought it. Guy got suspended, and that's why we picked up Rumble, to be able to make sure that we were uncensorable. So, and we pulled away from the church's page and put it here so that we could have more freedoms to say whatever we felt like we needed to say and be able to talk about issues like this without really interfering with the message of the church specifically. And so now we're still seeing it. They changed CEOs at YouTube, but now the shadow banning, if you want to call it that, more so as outright banning, is they're going in and they're doing it quietly. They're not striking your channel, but what they're doing is they're limiting your reach even more so. Like, you can literally sometimes type our channel's name in and you won't be able to find us, depending on the topic or certain video that we've done and what we've talked about. And so, and it comes from the policies of this, because this man himself said he was science. And then science now being questioned, which is the whole aspect of science, is unquestionable, and now it's lost its voice. So here we are sitting, we still have a voice, because we had to somewhat play by their rules. And to an extent, we have to be careful with some of the things that we say, because we're limited on the possibility of reach. Now, when we go to Rumble, that's off limits, but Rumble has its limitations. And so even with our short little reach that we've had here, is we've been silenced numerously, and Facebook more so. Facebook they'll just take down your video. You can't pull it back up. They can't really strike you or anything. They'll just take your video and you can't really do anything about it. Whereas YouTube will take your video down and then also strike you and prevent you from being able to go up on the same channel. And then if you had to create a new channel, but that's a whole logistic nightmare. But the reality is yeah, we were silenced to a degree and shadow banned a lot. And then, because here's what we noticed, is when we created our own channel, the Pipeline Report, and we left the church channel alone, our church channel started growing again. And then when we went over here, we had limited reach. And so there's kind of the facts for us that show, like, okay, our church channel is growing, but now here we are sitting here on the Pipeline Report, and our reach isn't growing, because what's happening is people are saying they can't find it. Who could find us on the church page are saying, oh, we can't find your channel on YouTube. And so there's some pretty strong evidence of shadow banning.
And let's talk about that politically as well as, I think, spiritually, what the enemy did through the whole crisis, and using him and the agenda of the next presidency, which was to censor any conservative voices, any voices like ours, to censor them, and using a crisis to do that. And that's a real warning for us to understand that. I think we're better equipped now. I think it was a trial run to see for the left, how can we control a whole society? How can we silence voices? How can we do? And this was like one of those tools. I can't say that they premeditated that, but they sure looked at it and said, hey, let's use this. And they found out that they could do it. We saw constitutional rights being ripped from everybody, all in the name of a crisis. And I think that's the warning that we could learn from this, to be careful of that. Let's not forget also, we released this word. It wasn't our word, but Jeremiah Johnson, during President Trump's presidency, before Fauci ever came on the scene, he gave a prophetic dream that he had, and the Lord showed him that there was a man in the White House who was facing President Trump, if I remember the dream right, had his hand behind his back, and he was taking money from China. And he called, and the Lord said to him, there was a rat in the White House. That was the word. And And here I think we prophetically, not we, the church, the prophetic church especially, missed this because I think it was the key to the election, the 2020 election. It was the key to everything that happened because this man's policies, this one man's policies, not only did he, just like the former Attorney General of Virginia said there, cost many lives, but one of the things he did is he controlled the election. This is when mail-out balloting began to become the trend because people couldn't go vote because of the virus. And so therefore we created this model with hastily of mail-in balloting, which then got crazy in the 2020 election. And really, if you ask me who put Biden in office, you're looking at, if you ask that's my personal opinion, as who did that. Let me keep playing a little bit more of this, and then we'll shift topics here.
Attributable to the Fauci advice and leadership, and frankly, much more valuable, obviously, than him pleading the fifth, has been the release of his diaries that Senator Paul obtained and released. And as Cheryl Atkinson said, what kind of grown man keeps a diary anymore? Right?
I don't know. That's true.
But the fact is, and it's probably somebody who has a great historical view of themselves.
Yeah, you're right.
And they were very telling.
They certainly were, which is why I took the fifth. And, look, in the early stages of the pandemic, nobody really knew
And let me pause there. I'll probably shift out of this a little bit. Dr. Fleming, I'll just save the time. Dr. Fleming, as he shared, I'm sorry, I lost us there. As Dr. Fleming shared, his point was that Dr. Fauci came out and made these declarations about masking, about all the different things. And he came out with no true scientific evidence to what he did. And that was Dr. Fleming's issue. Because Dr. Fleming, if the evidence would have been there, Dr. Fleming said this, he would have supported it. He would have supported the actions that were put out there. But there was no evidence. So as a physician, and they tell you to follow the science, but they came with no science. And this was just, they caught him in his diaries, but they also caught him privately saying these things. He knew that the mask was stupid. It didn't work. He knew the distancing wasn't going to work. He knew all that. And of course, Dr. Fleming said this. He said the shutdown, or the shutdown was one of the worst things that ever happened. If you remember in the beginning, there were voices of virologists who were saying we need herd immunity. And when Florida probably had the most lax rules, I think, Zach, you were in Florida at that time, had the lax rules, they didn't fare any worse than any other state. New York, who had probably the hardest lockdown, had some of the highest numbers of deaths. So we proved that in herd immunity. In Louisiana is a classic case there. We had the least vaccinated people in the country because Louisianans are they just don't like anybody telling them what to do. That's pretty much the attitude of most Louisianans. And we did have a lot of COVID cases, but we also later had the highest immunity rate of any state in America because we had herd immunity. The very true science of what biology tells you will happen, happened. And I think that the people that, if I want to say this, and I'll say this as somebody who used to be in the medical field, the people that needed to be in lockdown or at least away from society were those with comorbidities. That they had high risk. They should have said, look, you need to be careful. You're the ones that's most high risk here, because those are the main people, if not almost all the people that died had those comorbidities, whether it be diabetes, heart disease, whatever, that they had obesity, etc. Those were the things that caused them to die more so than COVID. So that's kind of the history there. And that's what Dr. Fleming said on that quote. RFK was on Face the Nation, and he brought some things out here. Let me see if I can find that link there. Yeah, let me move over here where he spoke about this as well. Let me add the tab there. Okay, let me play this clip.
Yes, Secretary, and you are talking about things that lead to vaccine hesitancy in this country, and it is something that causes problems for people when there is not anything.
Let me ask you something. Do you see your job as ending vaccine hesitancy, or do you see your job as telling the truth to the American people?
I see my job as telling the truth, and the truth is that there is study after study after study. It's one of the most studied things out there in science.
You're repeating
and it
it
is
like a parrot. You're repeating
So are
it
you.
like a parrot.
So
I've
are you.
actually read the science.
You
You
don't
and I
wanna-
come
you don't
back
wanna-
here and debate the
So
science.
I'm not debating this with you.
Of course you won't.
No, because I'm not
all you
debating
know how
all-
to do is repeat things that people told you and say, trust the experts. That's what you did during COVID. Now we know that Anthony Fauci, who was the expert, was lying about everything, about masks, about social distancing, about natural immunity, about the transmission from the vaccine, about the source of COVID. He was lying, and you were punishing people for not trusting the experts. And now you're rolling out the experts again
Yes.
to talk about something that you have no personal knowledge of.
Okay, well, guess what? That is my job, to talk to people.
Your job is to
Am I
tell the
allowed to
truth
talk?
to the American
Yes,
public.
yes. And my job
And
is
to
to
be-
get as
and
much
to-
information as I
And to
can. And
maintain
what we were doing,
a posture
what we were
of
doing,
fierce skepticism
what we
toward
were
government
doing
authority.
in COVID and still, with regard to these vaccines, is getting the best information, the best science that we can, and putting it out there. And sir, what you are doing is causing
getting the best
information
science
to be
from
out there
somebody
that
who's
is
lying to
not
you.
accurate.
Who was lying to
The
you?
National HHS Secretary.
Okay. Kudos there to RFK for speaking out on that issue, and that was the narrative. And what he said there was very important. Everybody kept saying the science is saying this, the experts are saying this, and they would never quote the experts. They'd never quote the studies or anything. That was Dr. Fleming's point. A congressman as well as a physician was, well, you're going to follow the science, prove the science. And science is always to be challenged. What makes science science is you challenge it. And you say, well, okay, that's one point of view. It's not another. And as we work with physicians, I worked in the medical field for 13 plus years. One doctor would tell you one thing, another doctor would tell you another thing, and that's part of science. And that's the thing that Fauci did not allow allow to happen, and he just had one point of view. And they said actually in his diaries that he spoke well of President Trump, because President Trump gave him leeway. And we said this back then, and we'll say it now, and we're not knocking President Trump. I think it all worked out for good, because I think he's supposed to be the president right now. The point is, he's a brilliant man, huge knowledge base, but the one area that he's the least knowledgeable in was the medical field. And this is where the Achilles heel of the enemy knew how to trap him and get him to believe, quote, the expert in this thing. And we now know this man was not an expert.
And one of the things that's interesting is that RFK Jr. took the jab. And so now he's coming out against it. That's, I think, a part people miss. There's actually a video I want to play where he talks about basically CNN's job, what their role is as a journalist company. And this is key because this is spiritual as well.
Arguing
Okay,
with
do you want to talk about assertions that you can't support? I'll get there in a second. Let me just say, for the record, that I am not saying that the entire way that the COVID reaction was accurate. It was a scary time, and people made mistakes. Absolutely.
You
Let
were
me finish.
scaring people,
Why are you saying that?
because that was the job of CNN.
Okay.
Was to put
Okay,
the
stop.
chyrons up
Okay,
about
stop.
how many people are
We
dying.
were trying to
To
be,
get people
we
to
were
comply.
listening to the leaders in this country, including the president, who had a daily press conference explaining what was going on and trying to listen.
Were you listening?
I want to
the
talk to
scientists,
measles.
Actually, were you reading the,
The
science
measles,
yourself?
the measles cases in the U.S. just reached a 35-year high.
And so he's calling them out here. He's saying, look, your job is to read not just what the president says, but to look at what the scientists are saying, look at what everybody else is saying. And the challenge is they still have yet to do a study with what this vaccine does with every other vaccine, and the concoctions of what you mix it. And all those who were saying, go talk to your doctor, you should get it, they're all backing down off of it. Even some on the right who were saying pro all this, because there's problems coming out of it, and we're going to start seeing that here if they will actually report it coming out soon. But the reality is we were in the mix of it. We didn't know, and I think that's where Trump got caught up. And the reality is for CNN, for everybody, all the media is saying pushing one agenda is their job is to kind of be truth tellers and say things as they are and call balls and strikes as best they can and ask the questions of, okay, dig deep. And they weren't doing it. And that's what RFK Jr. right there is calling out. And he himself was someone who took it, and then also Fauci in his diary, he hid the fact that he got it, and he went and kept it quiet and was still out there saying things that, oh, there's no problems, there's nothing wrong with it.
He actually had he actually had a physical problem. He had what they call a pulmonary infarction. He had actually, I don't know, a week or two later, I can't remember how long it was, but he wrote it in his diaries that he knew it was a side effect of the vaccine. So, I mean, this is the farce of the whole thing. And we got to learn from this as a nation, as a body of Christ. And look, there were many pastors that got up in their pulpits and said, listen to this man and do what he tells you to. They had more faith, listen to me, in a scientist than they did in Jesus Christ. They were not hearing. We gave a prophetic word. We gave prophetic all the way through that. I had a dream in August of 2020. I shared it on my podcast back then. I had a dream, and this is before the jab was created. It wasn't even made yet. And the Lord showed me that more people would die from the jab than they would from the China virus. So I warned people, because of that. It was just like I told people, you got to make your own choice. I didn't tell anybody, you're evil if you don't, if you take it. Some people had to because of their jobs, etc. But I felt we had to warn people what the Lord was saying there. And there was a very vivid dream that has come to pass to the T, because there were specific details in there. There's no way I could have known it. And it all came to pass. What I think that we could learn from this, and we need to pray for the president, because that's what this pipeline is about, is that the voices that need to be heard would be heard by the president. And in that case, it's a classic case that not the right voices, at least a diverse voice, was not allowed to have an audience with him. So therefore, he couldn't hear those other biologists, the other immunologists who were saying, look, there is another way. We can do this another way, herd immunity, et cetera. Watch out for those who are high at risk, and don't worry about the children. Don't worry, and that's true. I think, I don't know, like just a couple children died, and we're not even sure if that was of COVID during the whole crisis, because their immunity was strong enough that wasn't going to happen to them. And so that was the biggest thing we can learn from all that.
And the sad thing is you had people who had family members die in the hospital.
Yep.
They couldn't go see them.
Yep.
They couldn't advocate on their behalf to the doctors, nurses. They were just locked up in a hospital, and the horror stories that came from that we won't even get into. But the reality is Oswald Chambers talks about this, and we talked about this last week, is that we as a society have come to the conclusion that we are to not question science, and we're to accept everything that science says.
Yep.
And the reality is we should. But he goes on to finish the quote, and he says, and we question everything from God that we should not question, we should accept, being that we have a full understanding of it, and it's our mindset has warped. And this is an old quote. This is an old book that I'm reading. You're seeing what somebody is as they're walking through Genesis here. And so this is a mindset that you're seeing the fulfillment of that, the fruit from that here with what we just walked through. And getting back to CNN and all the journalistics, is they're called to be natural watchmen for those who don't have the time to look through the news, to look through the studies. And I think RFK is right for being upset and saying, look, this was your job to do this. Your job is not to peddle in fear. Your job is not to just, push an agenda of what one person says. You have a bias against or towards somebody. Your job is to, no matter your opinion, look at the facts of the truth as they are and let people know and let people make their decision. But what they were saying is, and what's funny is that all the people who used to be at CNN, most people like that, changing its tune and because they lost a lot of viewers, they lost a lot of money, and they're getting back to partially being those watchmen on the wall of calling things out. And that's a fruit of that, is because they went too far. Even Fox went too far to a degree, and so they're having to go back towards the middle and being, independent, or more so journalists, and actually do the job of what a journalist is. And that this is where independent media came into play. People like us, people like Daily Wire, The Blaze, a bunch of people gain momentum from this because they're just sitting there saying, hey, we're telling the news or we're giving our opinion. And I think that's the thing that people like Brian Seltzer from CNN, who was saying, well, we're telling the news, but in reality, they were giving their opinion. And I'm naming names because the reality is we need to name names when these instances come up. And so now we're seeing the fruits of this. This is the reality of it. And I think RFK Jr. is in the perfect position to call this out.
And one last thing, and we'll move on to the next topic, is that there is a danger here. I was watching or read a thing by Alan Dershowitz. This pardon, which is kind of unheard of, that he received a pardon before he was ever convicted. If you notice something, also it came out in the diaries. He asked for the pardon to go all the way back to 2014, because that's when he started the gain of function work with the Wuhan lab. And he gave it like a day before he started. So I think if he started on the 15th, he asked for the pardon from the 14th on. So that all came out. And so it was a pretty unique pardon that he got there. But this, with the states that are potentially going to prosecute him, they're looking into the legality, the constitutionality of it. If they do pull that off, let's say they allow that states can supersede a presidential pardon. That's a whole can of worms we've never opened before, because usually a president's pardon covers them for the rest of their life, everywhere, at all times. So if this happens, then, okay, what happens when there's actually a good pardon for somebody, and then an evil entity, let's say a liberal left-wing crazy nut, says, okay, I don't care that President Trump gave him a pardon, I'm going to prosecute him, and bring him back to that state and do that. So this is really kind of a scary. We need to pray. Dershowitz said that they should just give him absolute immunity and say, just tell us the truth. Just tell us the truth. Let's have an open debate. Tell us the truth. You made mistakes. You thought you're doing the right thing, whatever, but give him absolute immunity as he would speak before Congress. But I don't see him doing that because he's somewhat of a narcissist. I think he loves himself. He loved to be on TV. He loved to listen to himself. And maybe he's changed now. I don't know, but I can't see him doing that. So. Okay.
Yeah, another thing they're talking about doing legally would be to challenge the blank pardon. Can a president just give a blank pardon?
Right.
Who will take that up is the challenge, because that's going to take years. So if Trump does it, it's going to have to be somebody outside of this administration to do that. Yep. And then the other talking point is because he went on TV so much, those are considered hours that he was working, and then so that boosted his salary for those years, and it made his retirement go up, which means we as the taxpayers have to pay that. That's right. And so that's where people are trying to challenge some things there, whether they will or not, but he made a lot of money from it, and so that's kind of the upsetting part that people are frustrated.
He was the highest paid federal worker in the United States. $500,000 almost. He was making each year as a federal worker, which is mind-boggling, to say the least. Okay, let's shift. I know we've already cheated up our time, but I thought that was very, very important, because these are things we got to pray about, that this does not happen again. And you had this little trial here recently with that little virus that happened in the islands in Africa. They were kind of testing the ground to see, hey, is everybody going to go for this? And the world said, no, we're not going for this. And all of a sudden, the virus went away. It just disappeared. So I think they're going to keep trying different ways to bring back a way to control the world. I think that's why after that hearing, if you didn't watch it, the Democrats celebrated him. Why? Because he did what they wanted him to do, which was to control society, control the media for the conservatives, did not allow them to have a voice, controlled everything. And so he's a hero to them. And we don't want to agree with that. We want to agree with what the word of the Lord is for our nation. Okay. Let's cover one more topic here, which is the Democrat Socialist. This thing is really growing. I've shared this prophetically. Okay, the Lord spoke to me about this. I shared it on my podcast. I've shared it here a little bit. These socialists, especially, are winning these primaries, and there's a big one in Michigan. The Saeed guy is running in Michigan on Tuesday. I was briefed about that this week, about the work going on there to try to defeat him. He's dangerous. He is the predecessor to Mondani. He's run before and lost, but what Mondani is saying, he got from this guy. And so this guy is a very dangerous guy in Michigan. We need to pray for Michigan on Tuesday on the primary that he would lose. I know AIPAC and other organizations have pumped a lot of money in that state to defeat him. We need that to happen in Michigan on Tuesday for sure. That needs to be a big one. But Bill Mayer is, he's a true liberal or libertarian, if you want to call him that. And, but big pro-Democrat guy. But he said recently his vote's in play because of what's going on here. But he said on his show, he lays out this agenda of the Democrat Socialists. So let's hear this from somebody on the left.
Where I don't read about some newly chosen, exciting new face in the Democratic Party. And then when that face opens its mouth, the Communist Manifesto or some other crazy shit comes out.
Sorry about that.
Again, let's just read the quotes. The DSA platform says you work as much as you are able and no more than needed. If that was any closer to Karl Marx's dictum, from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs, they'd be sued for plagiarism. Not to leave any doubt, New York Mayor Mondani once tweeted Karl Marx's words exactly. They're not trying to hide it. Their most popular influencer, Hassan Piker, thinks communism is so groovy. He laments the fall of the two of the most murderous regimes in history, the Soviet Union and Chairman Mao's China. Mondani's aide, his top aide, Sia Weaver, said, if you don't believe in the government's sacred right to seize property, it's over, and impoverish the white middle class. What? That's a goal? You know you're supposed to scare people into voting for you, right? One of the new soon-to-be Democratic congresspeople, Darlisia Chevalier, supports seizing all properties from landlords and said, seize the means of production. Mondani has said the end goal is seizing the means of production. I think they want to seize the means of production. Now, maybe you missed that in school or missed school altogether, but that's communism. That's communism, which we tried, and it doesn't work. Parties can change sometimes, you know. You have to keep up. Who freed the slaves? Republicans, Lincoln. Democrats were the racist party back then, but then JFK got elected and it switched. The DSA itself has switched, even 5 years ago. It shunned communists. That changed. Things change. Now the coalition within the DSA, called the Marxist Unity Group, is in ascendance, and I must take them at their word when their words include, our commitment is to the long-term struggle for a fully liberated, classless society, in a word, communism. What do they have to do? Tweet out, elect more communists? Oh yeah, Sia Weaver did that. Yes. Good, I'm glad you're shocked. People got to realize.
Okay, we could go on. This is powerful what he's doing there, and he's just laying it out. And he said his vote's in play because of this. Look, this is scary, but as I said before, the Lord showed me that God is using or allowing this. I'm not saying he's doing it to uproot these entrenched Democrats who've been in Congress and Senate for forever, and actually were promoting policies that were socialist, communist as well. But they cloaked themselves as Democrats and democracy, when in fact they were promoting the same basic ideologies. And so what we're seeing now is a difference. It's the cold and the hot. There's no lukewarmness now. And so now we know who our enemy is. And so this would have never happened to have a liberal Democrat come out and expose their stuff. They're exposing it now. Listen to me, and I've said this before. In all these districts where these socialists are winning, no Republican was ever going to uproot them ever, because those are districts when a Republican get 20%, 10, 15% maximum vote. So they had to be removed. So God is supernaturally allowing this to happen. And then we can watch these guys fail. That's what we want to see, and then fail, and then righteousness prevail in the midst of this.
Yeah, the same thing's happening on the right. But I want to play this from Democratic Socialists of America co-chair in New York, because this is the young people's perspective. You know, he talked about some of the quotes about landlords in New York and Madami and everything, but this kind of sums it up, and this is their argument of what they're saying.
The problem we're facing in our housing system is that we talk about tenants and we say they have to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. They have to be responsible financially. But when we look at the landlords, we don't use those same standards. Landlords in New York have been making a 12% return on their investment on average.
How much should they make? What's fair for the landlord to make if you don't like 12?
They're complaining that 12 is not enough. And we don't think that anyone should have a constitutional right to double-digit returns on their investment. That's why we've implemented...
No one should have a right to a double-digit return on their investment.
No one has a right. That's not... No,
what are you talking
no
about?
one's in the, that's not in the Constitution, but what we see is that when we implement a rent freeze, we have landlords who are crying that the government is going to put them out of business.
They're trying to run a business, and they're trying to do it effectively. No, are all landlords perfect? Are some landlords lousy? Of course they are. But I just think that the idea that no one should make a double-digit profit is the antithesis of the desire to, you can be anything you want to be.
And so the challenge here for somebody like this is not understanding the realities of obviously a free market system, and that's something they don't necessarily want to do. And let me take this off. But the challenge is they're talking about the landlords and the cost of living and the cost of buying a house. And you're hearing this story more and more about how new home purchases or starter homes are 5-6 times more than what their parents was or what baby boomers was. In a sense, that's true because they want the house that their parents had in their 50s and 60s, not that their parents got when they were in their 20s, the 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom house, townhome, whatever, something. They want the 6-bedroom house with granite countertops, luxury everything, 3-4 car garage, and that's just not reality. So when they say, it's unaffordable, it's unaffordable because you're stretching outside your means. And you're not starting small and growing little by little. And then on top of that is they want no imperfections. They don't want to have to redo anything, have to learn how to do something themselves. And then you're also seeing the fact that a lot of them, this is their biggest problem, is the fact that they have mass amounts of student loans. And so when you have the amount of student loans that they do for useless degrees where they can't get a job, they're unable to reach for the lifestyle that they want because their parents aren't supporting them and or want to support them or can support them. And so you're seeing a lot of the things that they've been told and sold in school, socialism, etc., things like that from these professors, that is crumbling before their very eyes when they get out in the real world. And what's the sad part is they're doubling down, and rather than being like, okay, I need to do something about this, is they're saying, no, you're the problem, not me. And that's not reality. And so you have a younger generation, because the Democratic Socialists of America are using the younger generations to tear apart the Democratic Party. And let me say this, the same thing is happening on the Republican side to a smaller faction. And if Republicans aren't careful, they're going to
That's right.
reach the same fate that the Democrats are right now. And so
Yep.
this is a clear warning for Americans to kind of wake up and turn their hearts back towards, somewhat reality, but as believers, towards God.
And this gentleman, a young boy, whatever, that young man there, his family are immigrants from Peru. So I think that here he is lecturing us on the Constitution, and they just got here. Yeah, that's just crazy to say that. And what Zach said there is very important. Let's pray that everything that's hidden be revealed, because there's a movement, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owen, and the like, that group right there, their goal is to turn America against MAGA and to basically take over the Republican Party. That's their movement. That's why they are so anti Trump issues, even though they in the past were for it. But they realize they can't, unless they create a divide, they can't take over the party. So this is part of the issue, the Democrat Socialists as well. They had to create a divide within the Democratic Party. Otherwise, they'll look like the other Democrats, and especially those that have been cloaking themselves and being exactly what these guys were anyway. And now they're just being blatant about it because they want to be different. And because the system is, quote, failing, let's face it, the system is broken and everybody wants change. And so, look, let's just try this. That's kind of what the younger people, especially young white women, educated white women, they're the ones that are pushing this more than any other demographic to push this forward. Because they just want change. I want to see something. This is not working. It's broken. Let's fix it. Well, this is not how you fix it. So we've got to pray that everything that's hidden would be revealed. Now, Joe Manchin, who was a former Democrat, well, he is a Democrat. I think he became independent, if I remember right. But he makes a point about this as well. Let me pull this up. I think he was on Face the Nation. Yeah, here we go. Let me play this.
Do you ever support a self-described socialist candidate?
No.
No way. My God, no.
And
Even
it
if they have some
surprises.
good ideas?
Well, I support the good ideas, but how could you support some of the crazy stuff they're for? Have you seen their platform? They're for dismantling everything that we know, whether it be the structure of government, Congress itself, or the Senate they want to get rid of. And then they start talking about all the crazy things. No police, no this, no this, no that. Are you crazy? We want a crime-free area. We have to have police for that.
Yeah.
We want a strong defense. We want a strong border. But if Democrats can't say that, and they start lining up with the socialist demands of what you are to be a socialist, energy will be gone. There'll be no energy, okay? We have right now a tremendous amount of energy we're producing, and the world depends more on us than ever before.
So I think that's a good point by Joe, and I think that's what this would have never happened. Okay, this would have never happened had these people not been put in office, and that's the point. At least when some of these primaries are not all in office yet anyway. They may good likelihood they're going to lose their elections. But the fact is, now we know the demons or the demonic that we're dealing with in the situation. So I'm seeing the good in this. Let's pray into this. Let's make sure we cover these issues. One last comment for you, Zach, and we'll shut her down.
Yeah, if you know history at all, quote unquote revolutions like this always start with the college students because they've been indoctrinated from their professors and
right.
those who, once they got out of the family system and put these ideas in their head, and these are, when you deal with people like this, you realize that these are not original thoughts. And the challenge will be, and the question will be, is how far are they willing to take them? Obviously, there are those who are willing to take them to the point of, running for office. But as you look in previous quote-unquote revolutions, is some were willing to take it to the extreme and some were not, and they died off. And that's the challenge here of seeing where this plays out and where this rides out to. And the reality is look, they need an option of, how do I get a job? What skills can I get? What can I do to get out of the student loan debt? Because a lot of them with Trump in office, and this is why they want to take him out, is because when he came in office this last time, he basically pulled all the continuing of, not them being able to pay the furloughs and the continued grants of their student loans. He's saying, look, you got to pay it up now. You got to pay it all up right now. You can't go any further. And there are a lot of people who they just thought the government was going to pay it off, so they stopped paying it. Well, what's happening now is if they are at a job, their wages are being garnished. And so little money they are making is going to the government to pay off their massive amount of student loans. And so this is their gripe. So they're crying for justice, they're crying for something, but the reality is they signed the dotted line, they took out the student loans. I did it, I paid mine back. And so from blessings from the Lord, but the reality is some people, they're not relying on the Lord, they're relying on the government because they were told the government will bail you out. And so they're having to come with the reality of the situation, and you got to feel for them. You can't, you can say, oh, they're evil. Yeah, they have some messed up thoughts. But the reality is, think if you were in the situation of, if you were in a place where if you were making very little money, you couldn't afford to live, and then your wages are being taken away from you, from the government because you signed a loan that maybe you shouldn't have taken and gotten a degree that is useless, and they're stuck. They're in this stress situation where they need a way to overcome that. And obviously Jesus is the only way through that for them, and that's where you can stand a line, you can have a boundary, but you can speak truth, but there's got to be some grace with it, which is true love. And so we have to be able to understand their situation and see, okay, how can they get out of this? Yes, they're wrong. Yes, they're delusional to an extent of what we believe because it goes antithetical to the scriptures. But the reality is they're stuck. And 1 Timothy 5:18 talks about this, is if a believer isn't willing to get out and go make an earning, he's no better than an unbeliever. And so you have a lot of these people calling themselves Christians who are unwilling to work, but then also at the same time, you have to understand that they're stuck, they're crippled. And if they've never had to, quote unquote, pull themselves up by their bootstraps, this is the first time in life that they're faced with this reality, and the stress and the anxiety and the depression is crippling them right now, and they need a way out of it.
Okay, so this week as we go tomorrow, these are the elections that we got to be praying for. There's a lot of primaries tomorrow. One, you got in Kansas, there are 4 congressional seats up. We have Michigan, there's 13 congressional seats up. Missouri has 8. I think Cori Bush, that former squad member, is on the ballot as well in Missouri. Let me see what else there is. There's another. Yeah, there's 2 more. Virginia has 11 seats. Washington has 10 seats. So Tuesday is a big one. There's actually in Tennessee on Thursday. I don't know why they're having a Thursday election, but they are. There are 9 seats up in Tennessee. So August is going to be a big, big month for elections. I know Minnesota on the 11th, before we get back to you on next Monday. There are 8 seats up as well there. Hawaii on the 8th has 2 seats up. We'll be back before Florida gets there. And Connecticut has 5 seats up. So this is going to be a big, big week on the primary. So please press in, pray, cry out to the Lord for justice, especially in that Michigan ballot where you have the radical Muslim who's running there. And this is a dangerous, dangerous one. Real anti-Israel, Jewish hatred, etc., all over him, anti-Semite. And so we have some real serious things that happen here. But trust the Lord in the midst of all this. I remember Chuck Pierce's word, 4 months of darkness, but we will see and experience the supernatural more than ever. But after those 4 months, we see a breakthrough. That's November. That's when all these elections will hit. So we believe that's the timing of the Lord. So thanks again for following us here on the pipeline. We love each and every one of you. Pray for you. Thank you for praying for us. Give guidance to us. May the Lord give guidance to us as we help you navigate through the news each and every day. God bless you. We'll see you again next Monday.